We're here today with Ben Horowitz, who is the Communications Director with the Executive Council Office of the Government of Yukon. Ben, thank you so much for making time for the chat today. I want to ask a little bit about your personal journey of how you got interested in, inspired by or started in the thinking about well-being measurement.
The pivotal moment for me was about 20 years ago as a student at the University of Colorado at Boulder. I attended a presentation by Hunter Levins, who is a co-author of this seminal work called Natural Capitalism. She co-authored this book with her then husband, Amory Levins, and also Paul Hawken. And what it does, this book, is present a very compelling vision for moving beyond GDP and ensuring that we value appropriately our stocks of natural capital upon which life depends. I took this presentation in. It was a game changer for me. I joined Hunter's not-for-profit, aptly titled Natural Capitalism Solutions. And that's when I began working with companies and other clients that were really focused on implementing the pillars of natural capitalism, because those who did it well, they understood that it was not only a profit-making initiative, it was really a planet-saving initiative. And that natural capitalism vision of counting what counts and placing economic value on that which currently has no value, ecosystem services and otherwise, it was a lesson at the time that was transformative for me and definitely propelled me into this career in public service that I'm in now, and always trying to advance the broad goals of sustainable development, even in a communications and kind of broad policy program role that I'm in right now.
So it seems like your concept of well-being is quite interlinked with the idea of sustainability. Is there a risk there of not doing justice properly to either if you unite those concepts or those objectives or imperatives in a single set of measures or a single concept?
I think for us within Yukon, some of the work we've done recently with the Canadian Index of Wellbeing to release a territory-wide profile of well-being, we have bridged that gap within our reports now public, in that so many of the well-being measures we track and are reporting on and gathered through surveying efforts, have strong alignment with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals framework. And, we struggle to see there being really any meaningful separation there. I feel like all these frameworks, they're moving towards the same end goals. And, I think it's a way to bridge across different movements and to align, different action networks that are very active in society. I think that was a number one driver for, why I got involved in this work through the Government of Yukon. You look out across our landscape and there were, hundreds of community and volunteer organizations and NGOs and municipal governments and First Nations governments, all with these, broadly related commitments to well-being policies, well-being outcomes, discussions of sustainability across some but not all. And, we felt like we had this unique leadership opportunity to, bring in a framework that was going to help, strengthen those network connections. And seeing what the federal government's doing on the quality of life framework, these questions are obviously front and center. You have leaders and you have laggards, but what is going to be that singular framework, if any, to really unite people and make good on this promise and potential of what we're doing.
You mentioned the SDGs. Can you say a little bit more about how well the SDGs capture your concept of well-being? And I would say, you mentioned the federal government, of course, they have now some obligation to think about the SDGs, but they also have their own framework, which is supposed to be overarching. And so this is something they're struggling with, is how to deal with the two of them.
Yeah, I would say politically, the SDGs are not on the radar locally within the Yukon. I think I gravitate towards the SDGs because I find it a very accessible framework. And I also find kind of great inspiration from what nations like Japan have been able to do with the SDG framework, like the way they've popularized it and mainstreamed it. I think there's really valuable insights to be gleaned there, and definitely interested in trying to adopt some of those approaches here in Yukon to build a greater groundswell around this. But I don't envy the position the federal government is in. Again, there's leaders and there's laggards, and I think what I've seen is that there can be resistance provincially and territorially to different federal approaches, and I really hope we can overcome some of those previous stumbling blocks and really unite on this one.
Okay, I want to touch also on Indigenous nations and governments. What economists had to learn is that some of the most important factors are to do with how we're connected with other people and with place and with identity. And some of those themes are things that we hear First Nations and Inuit and Métis tell us are important to them. Can you maybe say just a little bit about the nature of those relationships in the Yukon vis-a-vis well-being?
For sure. Yeah, the landscape for Indigenous governance in Yukon is incredibly compelling. Of the 14 First Nations in the Yukon, 11 are operating under the umbrella final agreement with modern treaties and equal partners at the government table. And as we've led this multi-year effort around advancing a well-being framework, those conversations with First Nations have been fruitful at times, but also challenging at times, because it's early days for everybody. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to work together. We want to advance shared outcomes, but we want to do so in a way that is culturally agile and culturally sensitive. What that's meant in practice is that our well-being work has helped Indigenous governments to determine what to think about, not what to think, if that makes sense. And it's helped them, inform their own citizen level survey efforts and, some considerations around measuring well-being. So we see a lot of strong linkages and opportunity there. But it's certainly early days because, even landing on that definition of well-being has been a challenging exercise for some. So I'm optimistic that First Nations in Yukon will benefit from what we're doing here. I just struggle to see immediate term kind of full implementation of the Yukon government framework.